you share what specifically inspired you to write Social Revolution is Baltimore's only solution?
Well, as I detail in the book, living in Baltimore City from 2009 to 2015, I started off very hopeful about the changes, me and a group of other people could make. And what I found in 6 years leading up to the arrest and passing of Freddie Gray was that we were making micro progress, but not macro progress. And that got me frustrated. And as I started to talk to people who were also working in the city, we were doing well at seeing micro progress, seeing groups of people and little pieces of neighborhoods helped and certain people helped. But the major systemic issues in the city were not being touched, not on any measurable or significant measure. And call it what it is, but I remember being at a conference one time and I fell asleep and I had a dream. And I'm not saying this dream is from God or anything, but I had a dream. And in the dream, there were residents of Baltimore City standing there, and I was there. And there were some people saying all the things that me and my friends and all these people who work in these organizations had done for the city. And there was this massive crowd of Baltimore citizens that were quiet and they never responded. And so someone asked, "Why aren't you guys responding?" And they said, "Because you never touched the issues that matter to us. You helped in micro, and we're thankful for that. But the major issues of Baltimore City were never touched." And that's when it started to hit me. What I'm doing, I could do for the rest of my life and never touch the major systemic issues that most people are concerned about. And so the idea of social revolution came about as the only solution to really cure Baltimore's problem.
Hmm. How did you choose the pseudonym Serial Intellectual, and how does it reflect in your perspective or mission in writing the book?
That's a really good question. So, like many people, I'm on a personal development journey. And what that means is really finding out who you are, trying to discover who you are. And one of the things I realized about myself since I was very little is I always had ideas. And as the last probably 15 years, I was trying to really understand, what does all this mean? Like, what does it mean that I have all these ideas? It just means I have ideas. Am I one of those people that whose mind is always busy? But my ideas come in the forms of paradigms and solutions and ideas for books and how to solve personal problems and sociological issues. And one day I was sitting and I was at a crux in my life about where I was going to go, to the left or to the right. And I thought, I'm like a serial killer, but I'm not killing people. I'm like a serial killer. Serial killer always thinking about how to kill people. I'm always thinking about how to solve problems, how to solve like personal development problems, how to solve sociological problems, and I can't stop it. It's I have a phone full of notes, and I went, I'm like a serial intellectual. And then I sent it out to a bunch of people, and they're like, "Yeah, that's pretty much you." And then I sent it out to more people just to make sure. Yeah. And I remember sending it to my niece because she's the most loving but yet critical person. And she goes, "That's you, big head." She calls me big head. She goes, "That's you, big head. That's you. That's been you all your life." So I chose it because it embodies who I think I really am. And I think it's kind of a cool name too.
Now, this book, I don't know if you realize this, but this could come off controversial. So, can you describe the layout of the book first of all?
Yeah. It's good for me to actually have a copy. So the book basically has an introduction that kind of covers some of the stuff we did, and then it goes into this idea of like what social revolution is. It's a brief little history of social revolution throughout the world, and then it argues that social revolution is Baltimore's only solution. And then we get into some real practical solutions and how Baltimore citizens can get involved in all these things, and asserts that the future is behind us, which simply means that nothing's going to happen in terms of significant change without young people. Deals with objections because there's some things in the book that people aren't going to like. They're going to think are just off the rails, and I'm just trying to be incendiary and start fights, and I'm not. So I try to address the objections. And then there's a manifesto, and all of this is proposed. I'm not, this isn't the Bible. This is me trying to be a solutionist because I believe it's better to implement solutions than to talk about problems. But the layout of the book really is more like a workbook handbook for the citizens of Baltimore to take up and say, this is what a social revolution looks like. This is how they worked in the past. And this is the usefulness. And by the way, most sociological movements for good in human history have either been 100% a social revolution or elements of social revolution implemented in them. And so I know it's controversial, and I know especially there's some of the solutions in here are not your kind of bacon and eggs type things, but we're past that in Baltimore. So I just wanted to put something in the hands of the citizens of Baltimore that would equip them, inspire them, and encourage them to change their city.
So, with that being said, can you explain one of the most controversial ideas that is presented, and maybe some of your rationale behind it, so people understand your heart?
Well, there's I've been told that there are a lot of them in the book. And one of the things when I go to solutions, most of the solutions that are in here, first of all, they're not all the solutions that need to be implemented, but most of the solutions revolve around, I think, Baltimore's biggest issue, which is basically violent crime and a lack of safety. Because nothing grows in volatility. Nothing. Zero. You don't go to Home Depot and find 0 degrees and 100-mile-an-hour winds. Nothing would grow. But we have things called greenhouses and nurseries. So most of them are that way. So some of them really revolve around that. So one of the most controversial is the demand for calling of a state of emergency and bringing the National Guard back in. And if necessary, actually implementing curfews. Again, the safest time in Baltimore in my 14 years there was right after everything happened with Freddie Gray. It was like you could hear a pin drop. Why was that? And I'm just saying, yeah. So some people say, no, we don't want to be militarized. It's like we already are militarized. There's already people with guns shooting people all over the place. So we already have a militarization. It's a question of, do you want one that's for you or against you? Do you want one that's just accidentally shooting you, purposely doing crime, or you want one that's trying to bring in tranquility and peace? And perhaps another one would be the insistence upon what I would say mandatory minimums. And I don't think they're severe. Like there's one at the very end that's called the Mandatory Minimum Discharge Act, because we have people shooting guns and bullets are flying, and there's no really penalty for that because most of these people, unfortunately, in some ways, they get away with just shooting guns and bullets flying. So I feel like if you're arrested and it's proved and you're charged that you unlawfully discharged a gun, that for every bullet you should serve a mandatory minimum. So like maybe it's like 10 years. You shoot off, pop, pop, pop. That's 40 years, and we take it out of the judge's hands because they're part of the problem too. So these are some of the controversial things that are in here, but I guarantee you, Baltimore's problems are not difficult. I know you've been told that. You've been told they're so complicated. It takes time. You got to give us time. You got to give us money. If Trump would get out of the way, if this, if that, they're not complicated. You could solve this in 30 days. But it's amazing how hard problems are to solve when people don't want to solve them.
How do you balance presenting these controversial ideas with the potential for public backlash or misunderstanding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure you can in some sense, because I think some people are so committed to keeping what we have that they're willing to distort anyone trying to help. One of the things I talk about in the book is that Baltimore has an autoimmune disease. Like if you made Baltimore a person, they have a sociological autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is when your body that's supposed to protect you turns against you. So instead of finding the bad guys inside you, it goes after your liver, your lungs, your spine, your neurological system, all these types of things. And so this explains why there are many people, not just me, who have tried to quote unquote fix Baltimore, and typically they're neutralized. So what I would say is this book is for the people. It's not for the politicians. It's for the everyday citizen to read. It's a workbook for them. And so what I would say is they need to read the book themselves. They need to think through it themselves. Maybe they'll say, "Oh, it's garbage." Maybe they'll light it on fire and start a fire with it. I don't know. But I would say that if someone's sincerely interested in saying everything we're doing right now is not working, maybe we need to try something that's never been tried before. I remember being sent an article. I've been sent this several times because of this book of the president in El Salvador and how he's cleaned things up. And people say, "Oh, it's radical." It's not radical when you remove people off the streets that are terrorizing people. It's not radical. So I would say that as long as people understand this is for the people, this is by the people, and this is of the people. This isn't about tyranny. This is about a vision for Baltimore that has Baltimore safe, a place of opportunity for everybody, and embodying what Baltimore is said to be, Charm City. And right now we're far from that. And so that's my real heart to see us be safe and have opportunities from everybody and be able to enjoy the city.
In your view, what's the most misunderstood aspect about the book? Maybe not controversial, but just misunderstood. People don't get it. How might you clarify it?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple. One is when I use the term social revolution, because most people don't understand that. What they hear is chaos. What they hear is January 6th. What they hear is, war, instead of taking the time to slow down and say, wait a minute, do you know that in the 1960s during the civil rights movement that there were elements of social revolution within that. And so one of the things people what they hear, what they need to differentiate between what they hear and what reality is. What we're saying is we have been given the power and the authority via our constitution and even the governing documents in Baltimore. We vote for people. Like we have so much influence and power as citizens. And so when people hear social revolution, they think forming an army or a militia or some group and storming city hall. It's like, it's not about that. It's really about saying the politicians should work for us. All the departments in our city government should work for us, not against us. We have a fundamental right to be safe. That's a constitution guaranteed right. And it's the duty of the Baltimore city government to ensure that we have the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And when they don't, it's our duty to do something about it. But I think that's probably one of the most misunderstood. And connected to that would be, okay, so how do we do that? Because when people hear that, they hear January 6th, militias, do we take up guns? By the way, I just have to say this. It's so interesting to me about what's acceptable and tolerable and what's not. For example, it seems to me that people are more concerned about the potential, how would I say, consequences or collateral damage of being hard on crime than the obvious and rampant collateral damages being done by crime. And so when we talk about a social revolution to get our city back to where we want it to be, right? We talk about without guns. We don't need violence, but what we do need is strategic, fiscal, and institutional boycotts. We need that. And I talk about that in the book. And that's misunderstood. You see social revolution. Oh, this is another crazy guy, wacko. Just swipe left on him. He's nuts. It's like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. Every sociological movement for good in the United States had elements of social revolution. Civil rights movement, women's suffrage movement, every single one had something. And so that's things that people would misunderstood. But I think if they read the book and they took time to slow down and not swallow the common narratives that they want you to buy because they want things to stay the same, you see that there's not much to be afraid of. They should be afraid, but you should be afraid.
You talk about the social revolutions being intertwined really in our history. Let's talk about the need and the timing for this particular book. Why do you believe now's the right time for a book like this? Is there something happening in Baltimore or the broader society that makes this message particularly urgent?
Many people know Baltimore's history better than me. including you, you know? And so the answer to that question is, first of all, like, if not you as a citizen, then who? If not now, then when? I mean, I don't know how many more people have to die. And I know people will have a visceral kind of reaction to that, but just hear me out. We don't actually have to have 300 murders. And I'm going to say something that's we're choosing to have an environment where 300 murders happen. That's a choice. There are many cities that don't have 300 murders. And that doesn't count all the shootings and injuries and the trauma we don't have to have that. So if not now, then when? Like how much and like what has to happen to change? It seems like there's a pathway and it's never going to change. And so now is the best time. When I was in Baltimore and I was leading a church, um, we were actually outside. I was outside my son, and we were kind of putting a planter in our house, and we heard gunshots. Pop, pop, pop. We didn't even flinch. And then we heard the sirens. And then my son says, "Oh, I guess someone else got shot." I literally stopped and started crying. And why I cried was I was like, we're anesthetized. Then 3 weeks later, I'm taking him to school, Baltimore City College. Sorry, Polly. It is what it is. We're at the bottom of the school, and there's someone laying out, bleeding out, white tape, red, yellow tape. And I just watched people, and it was like traumatizing, but it was like normal. And that's when it hit me like, we have to do something now because I think the worst thing that's happening is we're getting used to it in some weird way. Not the victims because they're suffering. Um, and then the last thing I'll tell you why it has to happen now in terms of this anesthetization is during this period of time, I wanted to bring awareness to our church and to the churches that we were, rocking with. Just how can we serve better? And so one Sunday, I had my assistant put the names of every single person who had been shot up to that point. It was like 190. It was like mid-year or something. The names on the chairs, and people walked in. They were like, "Oh!" And I watched this. "Oh, is this seat saved now? Like, are we doing save seats?" So people go, "Why do we need to do this now? The mayor just needs more time." No. You know, we have a sociological terminal disease. When my mother got bladder cancer, the doctor says you have two choices: die or we take your bladder out. Now, saying I'm not sure is die. You take it out now. So that's why now we don't want anyone else hurt. We don't want any more trauma. We want to enjoy the city. And Baltimore deserves it. There's beautiful people. The 99.9% of people in Baltimore have nothing to do with all this nonsense, and they deserve a better city now, not tomorrow, not yesterday. They deserve it now.
How does your book fit into this larger conversation going on about social justice, urban development, systemic change throughout America's cities?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to systemic injustice, I think systemic injustice can be viewed from two primary ways. There's what the system or people groups can and are or have done to you that may have or have had effects, and then there's what kind of undealt with behaviors can do. What is systemic injustice? Systemic injustice is something that's prevalent, that's felt, and that is kind of system wide and unavoidable. It's kind of like COVID in the sense it's going to impact everybody, right? So, systemic injustice is not just racism. Systemic injustice is not partial. That's what we need to understand. So anyone is capable of inflicting systemic injustice. Now, I know some of my colleagues and some people who are, in some cases, way smarter than me would totally disagree because that systemic injustice can only be used for the paradigm of racism. They're just wrong. Systemic injustice is not partial. It is not compartmentalized. So to me, a systemic injustice in Baltimore is the level and degree of violent crime. Why is it systemic injustice? Because so many people who are innocent are being impacted, losing their jobs, limbs, ability to walk. That is systemic injustice. So how does it fit within that narrative? Yeah, one of the best things you could do to fight systemic injustice is to find it anywhere and eradicate it everywhere, and be just as impartial as it is. If it has a black face, it's got to go. If it's got a white face, it's got to go. It doesn't matter what face it has. It's up to no good. So that's how it fits in. And I think um, it's hard for people to prosper when they have to look over their back all the time. You look at any place in our country where there's real prosperity, whether that's in the home, relational, or even in jobs. You know what you will not find? All these high levels of violence. Because how can you prosper in that? It's very difficult for the masses to prosper. So the way it fits in is that if we make our cities safer, then we're going to have more opportunities. If we have more opportunities, we're going to enjoy our city more. And so that's how it fits into that whole narrative.
As we think about the response and engagement that you may get from the book, how do you hope readers, particularly those from Baltimore, will respond to your work?
Um, First, I hope they give it a shot. I hope they actually read it. It's a short book. It's like 100 pages, and it's an easy read. It's got pictures. It's illustrated. It's a very easy read, and like I said, it's a workbook. It's meant to be put in the hands of citizens, and then they can actually work through it. And there's actual suggestions of like what they can do. So what I hope they do. So it's like, here's a chapter, practical solutions for citizens to change their city. And there's like 5 things you can actually do to change your city. And so what I hope happens, they give it a shot. What I hope happens, they read it. What I hope happens, I hope some colleges in Baltimore City and high schools have the guts and maybe their social studies or political studies classes to read the book, assign the book. Like, what's the harm? People might get ideas. So what I hope is engagement. That's what I hope. And that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm sending this book to the mayor, to state's attorney, to the governor, to all of the members of city council. So everybody's going to get a copy. Everybody who wants a copy, especially if you work in Baltimore City, if you're you're a leader in Baltimore City, I'm willing to send you a physical copy. Electronic copies are free, because I just want it out there. I do believe that there's enough content in here to actually help, and so that's what I hope. I hope there's a level of engagement and that people give it a shot. What we're doing right now is not working, and if we keep doing the same thing, it's not going to work. So we need something different. So that's what I hope happens.
Good. Have you encountered any significant responses or criticism since the book's release, and how might you address them?
Yeah. So the concept of this book actually started in 2019, almost 5 years ago, with the Subversive Institute. And when I first launched Subversive, I got a lot of pushback. Hardly anybody liked it. When I went to some of the community leaders, even housing association leaders, I was told to shut it down. Some leaders in major newspapers told me, "Don't do Subversive Institute." I mentioned the idea for this book, and they were like, "Nope, nope, don't do that. That's dangerous." And this is what's hilarious to me in a really sad way. So this is dangerous. So what do you call what's going to happen today? Today, right now, it's what, 11 o'clock. What do you call that's going to happen today? It's unbelievable. So I just was like, so what it was a confirmation. At that time in my life, I was working for a religious denomination, and I felt like it would be a severe conflict of interest for me to pursue that. So I didn't shut it down. I put it on pause. So I have gotten some feedback, and I know there's some people who are not going to like this. They're going to view it as dangerous and whatever. But I don't think it is. I think it's just one man who would like to see an idea spread that could potentially change the city. And I do really believe that some of these ideas in here they're good and they would work and they would make Baltimore better. So that's kind of how I would do it. And personal attacks, I don't care about them. Like, people are going to have personal attacks. They're going to say, "Oh, this, that, you, blah, blah, blah." I just hope people deal with the content of the book. And if they think it's disagreeable, that's great. My response to them is, okay, here's my solution. Here it is, 100 pages. Outline? Blah, 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 blah. You think it's garbage? Tell me yours. And where's it at? Where's your book? Where's your pamphlet? Where's your website? Where's your what? And now before I end this, I want to say this: there are many people in the city who are already working. I said at the beginning, I'm proud of them and I'm happy about them. But I really want people to engage and move towards solutions that will really work.
When we talked about the impact and maybe your dreams for the book, what's your greatest hope and for the impact of the book on Baltimore and even other cities where people might face similar challenges?
That people's in their 20s, lower 20s, would get a hold of these concepts, would take a few of them, implement them, and in the next 2 to 3 years, even sooner, the city would be changed, and I would be forgotten, and no one would ever remember that I even wrote a book. And the serial intellectual people would be like, "Who? What?" Like it doesn't matter. All that matters is that the city is changed. That's what I hope happens. And I believe the people who made the problems aren't going to fix them. Because as a general rule, the people who make the problems never fix them. So that includes me. I'm part of Generation X who made the problems. So the future is behind us. That's a chapter in the book. And what that means is I really believe the future of Baltimore City is in the hands of young people, young 20s, and even teenagers. Most of us are aware of how young most of the people in the civil rights movement were. And that's what I hope. I hope the young people get a hold of these concepts and run with them and implement them and change the city so the city's safer. There's more opportunities for everybody, real justice, and that it truly embodies the nickname Charm City.
Can you envision a practical roadmap for how the ideas in this book could be implemented and maybe some real world policies or initiatives that come out of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of them would be like vision's what you see when you close your eyes. I'll just tell you a few. One of them would be it'd be great if, and I know this is being done in some areas, but it'd be great if it was larger scale, if more people were gathering on around a table, putting a problem of Baltimore. These are just ordinary citizens, not politicians, not consensus groups, ordinary, and saying, here's a problem in Baltimore City. And they just say, how would we solve this? When that happens, change is going to come. And when that happens, they're going to be resisted too, because the system don't want that to happen. They'll say, oh yeah, we want it. No, you don't. It's like, vote for us and give us money and we'll do it. But you're not doing it. I would love to see those. I call those strike teams. Call those strike teams. When groups of ordinary citizens get around a table, put an issue that Baltimore is challenged with on the table, and they start thinking, how do we solve this? And then they go, let's meet in 30 days and come back. Let's do some research and let's formulate solutions. And then let's present them to our council members. And then let's do that. And then when they don't listen to you, which they're not, then you're going to have to implement some of the stuff in the book, like strategic fiscal and institutional boycotts. And that's what I hope to happen. Another thing that would be great is what if we had like, I have this vision for like a solutions conference. What if maybe twice a year, once a year, we had a solutions conference? You could hold it at Morgan State. And the idea would be you speak like a TED talk and you get like 10 minutes and you address a problem in Baltimore, but you don't talk about the problems and this and that and Trump and racism. No, 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 no. It's a solution. And you literally have 20 or 30 or 40 people presenting solutions. And then they have tables. And then you can go and work with those people on how to implement those solutions. Those are like practical ways. Like we should have a solutions conference in Baltimore where you can't come and speak unless you have a solution and you're not getting paid, but you have a solution you've been working with others, networking with others. And I think that would be great. And then maybe one other thing is I'd love to see some of our, I guess, articles of government changed. I'd love to be able to, if you elect a person like a mayor, you should be able to get rid of them. by maybe like a 1/3 vote. You know, like if they got elected with 4,000 votes, maybe it takes 2,000 votes to kick them out and put someone else new. Like it's too static, it's too predictable. Like we should be, if you're not working for us and we, the citizens, aren't happy, we should be able to get rid of you. But that's not in our current constitution, by the way. But I'd love to see some changes in the way we legislate Baltimore City that are for the people, that empower the people. That's never going to happen unless there's a social revolution because those in power don't give up power. And so, what I'd love to see happen is see people sit down and say, how would we even implement that? And by the way, y'all, if you go to the articles, you ain't going to find this stuff in there, and they're very difficult to find on purpose. So, I'd love to see a few of those things happen.
So let's say that your vision for social revolution were to be fully realized. What do you think Baltimore would look like in 10 years?
The best city in America, hands down. It truly is Charm City. I cannot emphasize this enough. People hear me talking, oh my gosh, he hates the city, he hates people, he hates black people. This is the biggest lies in the world. That is arguably one of, if not the most beautiful city in the world. There's a reason why it's called Charm. It's gorgeous. The whole city, the landscape, the hills, the neighborhoods, the people, the intelligence. There's so much untapped potential. Um, when I used to drive, I moved to Baltimore City. People say, don't go there, blah, blah. And I tell them, you don't see the beauty. There are kids in these schools singing Bach cantatas in Latin. There's so much glory and beauty in the citizens, so much intelligence, so much wherewithal, so many gifts, so many skills, and so much of the way the city's ran in terms of the fact that it's so kind of unsafe and so many of the decisions economically, man, I want to see a flourishing city. And I'd love to have a city where people are not just generically proud, but people feel like I have an opportunity here. I remember I've talked to so many people. One time I did an experiment and I interviewed 100 people in the city, and I said, if you were given $100,000, what would you do? I think the number was like 91 or 92 said move. I'd like to see that different. I'd love to see it when people would say, if you give them $100,000, first thing they would do is not move. They'd be like, oh, I'd stay here, or I would do this because it's enjoyable. And I really believe that, like, the lack of ACs in schools and all of the issues that we cover in the book and everybody knows about, we deserve better. We really do. And the people in charge, they need to work for us. And those little kids that we have that go to school, and our high schoolers, and the moms and the dads who are walking their kids to school, the moms who are working multiple jobs, we're working too hard and trying too hard to have our public servants get up and have talking points. They should be securing our future, our right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness unfettered. And so, yeah, I mean, we Baltimore's a beautiful city, and we just want it to embody all that it is.
So turning the attention away from the book and back towards you, how's writing the book changed your own views or maybe deepened your understanding on some of these issues that it addresses?
So I'm more convinced than ever that these are the solutions for our problems. I'm more convinced than ever that the only reason why they're not implemented is because Baltimore has a sociological autoimmune disease. I'm more convinced than ever that 90% of Baltimoreans, if you take out all the talking points that people want them to be afraid of, they totally agree. They'd be like, yep, 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 yep. Now, some of the methodology, I don't want it to be that hard on crime. And I don't want, my cousin going to jail for that long because he made a mistake. I get all that. But I'm more convinced than ever that these are the solutions. And one of the reasons why I'm more convinced than ever of these solutions is because the things that are being implemented aren't working, and they haven't worked. They're never going to work. Um, and seeing these types of things being implemented in history and seeing them implemented in other countries and seeing other places in the United States where you're your your quality of life is enhanced, it just makes um, it makes me desire it more. And then for me personally, people can kind of call us what they want, but I had to write the book. Like, it wasn't really a choice. It's like, I believe this. So I need to write the book. And I need to try to put something in the hands of the citizens of Baltimore that could help them. And that could, I could help the whole area. And so it's been a transformative journey, but it's been one of kind of validation and affirmation. And it's been, I can say I tried something. I did something. People say, "Oh, but it was this, it was that." It's like, but when I take my final breath, I'll be able to say, "I did what I could." Maybe it wasn't enough, but I did something. And I believe somebody somewhere in Baltimore City is going to grab this book and they'll get one idea out of here and it'll change. And my name perish, but all I want is what's good for the city. And so that's how it's kind of how it's worked in me.
So my last question is this: as you think forward, are there any topics or ideas that you felt maybe you couldn't fully explore in this book that you might want to address in some of your future work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do I do recognize that, like, for the solutions, the majority of them surround what I think is Baltimore's biggest issue, which is violent crime. Some people are going to disagree with me and say that Baltimore's biggest issue is not violent crime. Baltimore's biggest issue is economics. That's why there's violent crime, and so on and so forth. So I think exploring solutions that are not just about violent crime, that are about economics, that are about education, that are about our justice system, about fixing and resourcing and making sure our police departments work properly, our infrastructure. There's other solutions, but I hope that maybe somebody looks at this book and they get angry and they go, "He's missed the whole point." Good, write the book. Make the speeches. You need to focus on economics. That's trash. Good. Write one on economics. I hope they do. Um, because I think we need the citizens to stand up and change their city because no one's coming and no one's going to save the city. So at the end of the day, what I hope happen is that the citizens actually rise up and they do something to change their city. And I want to say again, thank you for all the people who work tirelessly in Baltimore City, who are changing the city, who are doing amazing things, who don't get the recognition that they deserve. There's some people doing some amazing work in Baltimore City, and they are not to be forgotten. And if anybody wants to do work in Baltimore City, they should find those people and partner with them, um, and do what they can.
Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.